Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you guys had a great summer holiday and you guys had lots of fun and got some chance to relax and contemplate and get ready for your year number two, which is very exciting. It's year two is a lot different, I think. Year two has a lot more self-directed stuff, so I think find you'll wind up doing a lot more things that you probably want to specialize in or you have more interest in. So hopefully you have a great semester. And if you guys need any help on anything, not just CG related, but I'm pretty handy with After Effects, Photoshop, all that kind of stuff. So feel free to ask for help in anything. Okay, so we're back in DA242, and rather than rehash lessons from last year, it'll be basically the same, but I wanted to make some updates, things that I found that didn't work, some things did work. So rather than just sort of use last year's, I thought I would record new ones just to implement a few different things. And I'm gonna be using Maya. This is Maya 2017. And I'm recording this in August, so hopefully the college installed 2017 like I requested. But if they didn't, 2016 for this stuff is pretty much exactly the same, so there shouldn't be too many differences. So, but hopefully 2017 is good to go because I really wanted to. There's some new exciting features that we'll get into later on. So, okay, and I did also install. I know last year people wanted to know what what mouse buttons I'm pressing and what keystrokes I'm doing. So I installed this little program that has this on-screen display of what I'm doing. It's a little bit annoying. So if you guys really find it distracting or whatever, I can get rid of it for future screencasts. So yeah, just let me know if it's bothering you guys, and I'll turn it off. But I thought it might come in handy. We'll give it a shot, see how it goes. Okay, so this first module, DA242A, is all to do with something called rigging. Now, rigging is what you do to prepare for animation. So if you're animating anything other than sort of just taking an object and moving it from A to B, or like the turntables we did last semester, you don't really need a rig. But if you're going to do anything more than that, like for instance character animation, you really have to have a rig, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to flip over to, this is a model that I've used for the last couple of years. I just downloaded it off the web somewhere. It's just a free model. Captain Atom, I believe his name is for Marvel fans. I've never actually heard of the guy before. He must be some kind of lesser Marvel character, I suppose. But we'll be using him later on. It doesn't really matter. It's just a model. So how, if you wanted to animate this guy, which we will do later on, how would we do that? So I'll show you why we need a rig. So I want to just make an animation. I want to bend this guy's arm. So without a rig, how the heck do I do that? Like, I've got to select something and all the verts and then rotate it. Ah, God, that's, it's terrible. I mean, you might be able to get it to work, but there's no smoothing in the sort of where the joints are. You're getting all these weird you know, it does not work, especially for a complex animation. You want to do move his leg up. You know, like that's not gonna work. It's terrible. It's basically, this is useless. So animating verts is not a good idea. It never has been, it never will be. What we really need to do is make a rig. I mean, it looks horrible. Just moving, even if you're not animating and you want to get a character into a certain pose, if you're just rendering out a still frame, this is not ideal. You're totally messing up all the volumes. It's distorting everything, and it just looks terrible. It's not natural. So we don't animate verts by themselves or geometry. We need to build a rig. So that sort of shows you why you need a rig. Let's go back to this. This guy here, our little cube man, is going to hit undo a whole bunch and get him back to its original state. This is going to be our first sort of exercise, project, assignment, whatever you call it. And we're going to make this really rough proxy character out of a bunch of cubes, and we're going to assign a rig to it and move it around a little bit and show you how things work. This is not intended to be anything demo real quality or anything. It's just simply an exercise to show you how things work, and get sort of a little bit of an insight on how rigs work. What is a rig? So we've talked about the need for a rig, but what does a rig actually do? As you can see, a rig, in this case, is basically just a skeleton. Has the same function as a regular skeleton. Sort of connects pieces together, you know, like the hip bone is connected to the leg bone's connected to, what would be next, the ankle bone? That's basically how it works. So you can think about it in terms of a real skeleton, but it's not limited to that. Like, I've seen lamps rigged. I rigged a robot, a 6-axis robot last year for a project. I've seen just super mundane things. Like I said, like a lamp. I've seen cars. I've rigged cars before. You can rig animals, 4-legged animals, you know, like whatever. It doesn't really matter. If you want to animate something, you have to have a rig for it. Character animation is probably like the best example. So what's the components of a sort of basic rig? So what we have here is, and I can actually turn off, I'll just turn off the polygons here so we can just see the skeleton. So what is in a rig? A basic rig or a skeleton. So rigs are generally consist of, but not limited to, joints. And these guys in between the joints are called bones. But bones, they have no function really. They're just a visual indicator. They're for selection purposes. So the only thing that these guys in the middle here do is allow you to click on it and it'll select that joint hierarchy. So the only thing that really matters when it comes to the structure are these joints. So I can take a joint and I'll hit rotate, E for rotate, and then I can rotate that. And you can see it's in sort of a hierarchy of movement. So if I select the hip, everything is going to move. But if I select the spine, only things above the spine will rotate. So that's what joints do. Joints are really the only thing you have to worry about. You don't need to worry about bones. They're just there as visual indicators. So joints are sort of the where everything rotates around. So essentially your pivot point for anything that's going to rotate. So the next key part about a rig, and you can see something called handles, or you could call them control handles. There's all kinds of different handles. In this case, if you look over here in my outliner, I've got what's called IK handles. So I'm going to hit, I'll show you what that is. So an IK handle, I'll hit that one, and you'll see it highlights what is connected to that IK handle. And an IK handle lets you do stuff like this. Sort of articulates like an elbow would. It takes two joints and it'll move the middle joint. You know how it sort of computes where that middle joint should be, but it also preserves volume and of your character, and it also it just makes it move in a sort of undistorted fashion, really, is what you would say. So, and all of these are completely animatable. IK handles typically you'll see them all over the place in character rigs, and you'll see I've only really got them on the arms and the legs. That's pretty much this type of animation. That's really only place you'll use them. So this is called inverse kinematics. That's what IK stands for, and these are the IK handles that control the IK. So this is called IK animation, inverse kinematics. And that anywhere where you have an IK handle and something, there's one handle that controls three joints and it sort of moves in like a leg would or an arm would, that is IK, inverse kinematics. And when you go to animate sort of like a spine, there is no IK handle. And you can rotate this like so. And that type of animation, just rotating a joint, is called FK, forward kinematics. And those are basically the two types of controls we have on a rig. There's forward kinematics and inverse kinematics. And notice what I'm doing with forward kinematics. I'm rotating it. I'm rotating the joint. You never ever in forward kinematics want to do anything other than rotate. You'll never ever do this. You'll never translate or move a forward kinematics joint. Never ever do that. That is a big no-no. And inversely, and you can see why you would never translate it, because it destroys your proportions, your volume of your character. Your character should not be like that. So however tempting it may be to translate a joint in forward kinematics, you will never ever do. It's just don't do it. It doesn't exist. In fact, if you ever make a proper rig, you can go over to your attribute editor, and actually in here you can actually say do not translate. You can actually lock the translations, which I would highly recommend doing. But we'll get into that later. I don't want to overload you guys. So now if we look at the IK handle, notice what I'm doing. I'm only translating. So with IK, it's the opposite. You never ever rotate an IK handle or IK. You always translate it. So they're total opposites in that regard. So that's very important. You have FK and IK, and you need to know the difference between the two and how to handle them. So that is, well, in class, I really want to like nail that down because I know that some students had problems with that. They were just sort of moving their rigs everywhere, and it was just turning into a huge mess. So if you can just remember that if you are not using an IK handle and you just want to rotate a joint, always rotate them. That's FK. And you only rotate those. If you're doing animation on an IK handle, you only translate, you do not rotate. And you don't want to use FK in an IK chain. So I'm not going to go in here to this joint here and rotate it. That is a big no-no. You don't want to do that. You only want to animate if it's in this IK handle, which is selected or highlighted with yellow or orange or whatever it is on your screen. This is the only way you want to touch that. Otherwise, you will mess up your rig. There's a lot of do's and don'ts with rigging, and those are the big ones. So FK, you rotate, IK, you translate, and if it's in an IK chain, any of these three joints, just use the IK handle. Do not rotate them. Okay, so I think that pretty much sums that up. So with this, I'll turn the geometry back on so we can actually see it. With this project, what we're going to do is start out with, you'll notice that it's all separate boxes or cubes. So we're going to start out with this cubeman just as a simple exercise to get started. And I'm going to go over what's called parenting. Now, parenting is huge in rigs. It's not just in rigs. Parenting is used, it's all kinds of stuff. In After Effects, it's there. You can, even there's some forms of parenting in Photoshop. It's definitely not exclusive to the 3D world. And what parenting basically means is if I move the IK handle here for this arm, these cubes follow, they're actually parented to these joints. So they move with the joint. So this cube is actually parented to this joint. And I can see that in my outliner if I go all the way through. All of these are parented. And now you'll see the upper arm right, and underneath that is the next joint, but also is the geometry for that upper arm. Now, if I go back, and I'll just show you what happens when you parent it to the wrong joint. I'm going to unparent this, so now it's not attached. And I will move the handle. Now it's not attached, and it's outside of this tree here, or the hierarchy. It's no longer moving with it. Now I can parent this cube to, I'll parent it to this wrist, and I'll hit P to parent, and I'll go back to my IK handle, and now you'll see the cube is following this joint here, the wrist joint. So it's no longer parented to where it's supposed to be, and it looks totally funny, right? So that's all it really means is this parent, this cube, I'll parent it back to that joint, just hit P, and now it should be back in order. There we go. So now it works again. So parenting is basically you're just putting this cube underneath this joint in its relationship so it follows it. So if I can show you another example. I can go, let's create, I'll just create a sphere, and now you can see my sphere and my outliner here, and I'll create let's create just a different shape, maybe a cube. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to parent this sphere to this cube. So I'm going to take the sphere and I'm going to drag it with my middle mouse, and I'm going to put it right under the cube. So now this sphere is parented to this cube. So if I move the cube, the sphere is going to go with it. So a couple ways of doing that. You notice how I took the sphere, I middle mouse dragged it onto the cube, and that's one way of parenting. Another way is just so I can select the sphere and I can shift click the cube and hit P, and you'll notice it does the exact same thing. To unparent, I can select the sphere, hit Shift P, and it unparents it, puts it back in the sort of root, if you want to call it, for you web guys. I don't know why this control keeps coming up. I'm definitely not hitting control. And you can also do it like I did before. You can also just drag it out and it unparents it. Okay, so we're over the 20-minute mark here, so I'm going to hit pause and then we'll actually get going. So to sort of go over what we did, what is a rig? Rigs are for sort of like structures for animating complex animations. We went over what joints are. Joints are sort of the pivot points of different points on your rig. Bones, you don't have to worry about. Bones are just these, they're basically icons, selection icons. That's all they're really, you'll notice over here in the attribute area, there's no attributes for a bone. It's purely for selection. So you don't even have to worry about bones. I'll probably never mention them again. We went over parenting, what parenting is, and most importantly, what IK is. IK is using these IK handles to articulate a group of joints in an inverse kinematic way. And FK, forward kinematics, is simply rotating joints that are not part of an IK chain. We translate inverse kinematics, IK, we don't rotate them. Forward kinematics, we rotate them, we don't translate them. So drill that into your heads, and we'll be back and we'll set up our scene. We'll start doing our cube guy and have some fun, I guess. Okay, talk to you guys soon.